2019. I'm joined once again by Michael Ford from Aegis. Seemed to be a regular participant in round tables earlier on. But I think you raised a lot of interesting points in your keynote, which we recorded as well, so we can refer back to those. But an issue that a lot of people are talking about at the moment is 5G. We're seeing a lot about it in the news. Industry is talking about it, but what does it mean for manufacturing?
If we believe our friends across the water in China, it's everything for manufacturing, because there are companies that have identified literally tens of thousands of potential points of information that they want to gather, and they see 5G as being a great way of doing that. Unfortunately, what they kind of forgot is that 5G is a telephone network. So, it's just like 3G and 4G in that all of the data that's collected from sensitive operations in manufacturing is now going onto a public network. So that can easily be, intercepted, and so the lack of security is really an issue. I think a couple of companies have come in and obtained 5G licenses, and they intend to offer a so-called private 5G.
Right.
But it's still a telephone network, and there is still a third party involved.
What is the attraction for Chinese businesses then? Is it the speed and the amount of data it can cope with? That's the attraction of it?
Yes, the technology of 5G is very impressive, of course, because the high data rate and also the low latency time. So communication is almost like, using a cable. There are also, however, if you compare advances in Wi-Fi, which is a very private network, it can be easily secured, and that can be beamed around the factory as well. I think, though, that people have had a less than optimum experience with Wi-Fi in factories, simply because of the nature of the machinery being metal, and doors being opened and interference happening. So, that has really left people wanting to use cable, even though cable is very expensive to run and maintain, especially if you're moving machines around.
It's a strange scenario, isn't it? And also, another issue with 5G is implementation. It's not going to suddenly be there everywhere and work, is it? It's going to be a slow process of putting it in countries. The coverage. Say in the UK, the coverage is not going to be complete straight away, is it?
That's right. 5G is really a point of sight. So if you can't see a receiver, it's not going to receive it. So you therefore end up with many, many different transceivers all over the place, basically. So we're going to be awash with them. So it's a lot of investment, a lot of infrastructure to go in there. But for me, it's a bit of an irony, because the security aspect, or lack of security aspect of 5G, we already see people in companies making sensitive products like military and aerospace who just would not tolerate that kind of openness. So I don't see that when people start to do the analysis in reality about how things are going to work, that they will actually allow the connections to take place with 5G.
And security is the bottom line, isn't it, across the board, really? I mean, there's a lot of EMS companies that, even if they're not entirely focused on defence and aerospace, they have some customers that are in that area. So you've got to have that standard across the board, haven't you?
It's true, and it's a great irony in the industry, because we've been talking a lot these past days about smart factories and how everybody wants everything to be connected and wonderful results of that. And yet you go into many manufacturing operations right now, and the discussion is whether any of the machines could ever be connected.
Right.
And so we see companies that they call it an air gap, where you do not have a link of any form of network infrastructure, even on cable, between machines on the shop floor and IT systems, which would be including ERP or MES, for example.
Yes.
And so, hang on, this is completely opposite from what we're talking about. And you're thinking, well, how on earth can any form of smart factory happen if we're not allowed to make any connection?
Without that, yes. So is Wi-Fi a better version of Wi-Fi?
There is no version of Wi-Fi that's going to work.
No.
Or cable for that matter, until we come to some sort of conclusion about how or what set of circumstances would we be prepared to accept for the connection of multiple third-party devices. And if you believe some of the companies saying there are 10,000 different devices they would like to connect, but in a mainstream factory of SMT, for example, it's probably going to be 30 to 100, 150, something like that. But all of those machines come from different vendors. They have different histories. They have multiple connective interfaces on board, any of which can be active at one time without any real control, because machine vendors and even solution providers have not really thought about security as much as...
No, it's never been their remit, really, has it, as such? So.
Exactly. I mean, you just expect to be able to connect everything by cable, and that should be fine. Yeah. But, we hear stories that on the shop floor, for example, a machine was connected, and suddenly some strange communication starts happening. And they spend, a long time trying to figure out what's going on. And they find that an old machine, like 20, 30 years old, has a modem in it. And the modem was used for an update. So it's looking for automated updates from the web. Yeah. And they had no idea that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But you can imagine that represents a risk to security, because they have no control or idea what that thing is for. No. And anybody could start to piggyback off that search.
It's a slightly nightmarish scenario, isn't it? But is that conversation even happening about what we're willing to accept? Has that started?
It really has, and it's accelerating, because the expectation for smart factories and connections, Industry 4.0, is firmly in people's minds now. The success of Connected Factory Exchange, CFX, has given people an expectation of what they can achieve now. And then they go to their IT team and say, look, guys, we want to have a project to do this, this, and this. And the IT guys just turn around and say, no, it's not going to happen. And so you need to kind of find a way through that, because it's part of a business need to connect these machines. But it's also a business need to have ultimate security.
Who can lead this conversation, though? Because the onus is almost on everyone, but who's going to take the lead in it?
I think that there are several companies looking at this issue right now, but from my side personally, working with IPC and Connected Factory Exchange, my idea is basically you create a network environment with the machines where you turn absolutely everything off. Now, maybe you can't turn everything off on the machine, but you can have a firewall that basically does not allow anything at all. It just stops all network traffic dead in its tracks. That is achievable today with normal network security. Yeah. Then, the nice thing about CFX is that all of the information from all of the machines goes through one particular port.
Right.
So it's one particular address, if you like, on the network. Now, the danger of having even one connection is that nefarious systems could piggyback off that connection and start to transfer things that you don't want. However, with CFX, the unique factor of CFX is that all of the data is very specifically defined.
Right.
So if anything were to go through that port which does not adhere strictly to the standard, it can be flagged and blocked immediately.
Right.
Is that enough? Is the question that is being posed right now. Yeah. By having a piece of software that sits on this port, listens to all of the traffic, checks the data against the standard and knows that this is allowable or not allowable data. And that software can simply be written by the company themselves. Right. So they're not dependent on any third party. They're not buying in anything that they couldn't trust.
And it's specific to their situation.
It really is specific to their situation. Is that enough to give the IT guys the confidence that they can allow the connection of the machines to the rest of the network?
Actually, CFX, we were having a conversation a little while ago where you were saying the irony of CFX, that it's open source, that a lot of people start to get panicky when we talk open source, yet I mean, you told me the benefits, which make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm actually a convert. In my past, I didn't like the idea of open source in that you are kind of using other people's code, and people will have generated it for a particular purpose that may not suit your purpose. And you are actually incorporating things that may cause an issue in your particular application. That was a little bit silly of me to think that, actually, but as an old school programmer, that's what came to mind.
I think it's a common issue, isn't it?
Yeah, I may not be on my own.
No.
But when CFX was created, the modern programmers of today will look at the software development kit and look at the actual source code itself, and they can very quickly assure themselves that everything in there is targeted to what they want. If there's anything they don't like or don't need, simply take it out.
Right, yes.
And they recompile it, and they've got their own bespoke version of an open source common tool. So actually, that is quite nice.
Because if it was a proprietary system they bought into, they would have no access to it.
They wouldn't, exactly. And you would buy a piece of software that could have lots of stuff built in that you wouldn't know about. So it's only by using open source that gives you that visibility. And so that is then a viable alternative to developing all of the code yourself inside, which, you know, is a little bit more of a task.
Yeah, well, so then does that lead on to, if we've been talking about the smart factory, smart workforces, that a smart factory will often in the future have a developer specific to that site, maybe not even the whole business, but specific to that site that can customize, work with SDKs, whether it's CFX or whatever, to make sure that what they're running is A, totally appropriate for them, and B, doesn't have any nasty backdoors or flaws that they have to deal with.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a very interesting focus for in-house IT teams, so that instead of, you know, simply outsourcing responsibility for systems and, you know, the kind of mundane, what I would call mundane things right now, actually they are going to become much more involved at a level where they can understand the data flows and understand what's going on in manufacturing. And they can start then to create a lot more value because they will understand the data coming through. They will be able to engage their own analytics and be able to add value to the business that has never been added before. So this kind of third layer of IT systems above the factory, they are going to be intimately involved in that. There's a huge opportunity for the developers in-house to really start to get to grips with that data. So security, the management of the network, sure, it's going to be a step change better than before. But for the ones who would like to go further, there's a huge opportunity.
And I mean, in general, the level of IP theft and attempted hacking and general problems with software or developing software, do you think that the industry is mature enough to cope with that? Because you can deal with those things, but you need to be very aware of it and what you're dealing with, because it's the route to producing some software that works for your factory is a short route. The route to making it bomb-proof is a longer route, isn't it?
It really is. At the moment, we do see companies who are extremely capable and reputable being targeted, and even they are having problems. There are very highly specialist companies for security that help companies understand the potential risks. It is, however, extremely difficult to be sure that anybody's data anywhere is safe. So, you know, you have to kind of put in things which are going to mitigate the effects of these things rather than just assume that everything is okay because you've got a particular way of securing the data. I mean, the simplest example that, you know, a lot of people just don't seem to understand is you have a company, they have employees. those employees are in the IT department, whether it's a bank or a manufacturing house or an internet service provider or anything like that. There are engineers, there are support people. They have access to everybody's data.
Yes.
And you have one of those guys who's disgruntled. You know, he's going to leave next week, he's going to leave the company, somebody comes along, maybe he's vulnerable to an offer of a certain, benefit, and he shares some of that data. It's happened over and over and over again, and probably many times than we realize. So, it's not really a question of being absolutely sure that there's no way of hacking in. It's really a matter of detecting it very quickly, and being sure that the potential damage is going to be very, very limited, but also very, very known. And I think this is a focus of that activity right now.
Yeah. So the lesson is be very careful with your IT staff and look after them.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, they should be having some nice benefits of it.
Yes. Well, thanks for joining us, Mark. I mean, it's a conversation that is going to keep going for a long time, this, isn't it? And it's only going to grow in complexity, probably. So. Yeah,
it really is. And, you talk about things like blockchain and all kinds of manner of things where people think that security is being enhanced. But, blockchain doesn't enhance security.
No.
It makes things tamper resistant to a certain extent, to a large extent, to be fair. But, the danger is that people jump on these things thinking it's the panacea of all that they need. But you're right, this is going to go on for quite a long time.
Well, I look forward to talking to you about it next year. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much.